Good evening. When Sandy asked me to do this, I was pretty excited about doing this. After I did the Bowers family, she said, well, you should do your family. And so that's what we put together. To quote our friend who the museum is named for, Janet Bowers Bothwell, and you all know how she spoke so eloquently, especially after she went to finishing school. I'm told that she's taught just like all of us until, and I can't remember, was it Miss Woods finishing school? Does that sound right? Anyway, she introduced me many times. She said, this is my friend Yancey Moore, and his family goes back 7 or 8 generations here in the valley. And I can get you back just about to that area. There are actually 3 or 4 family names, and I won't bore you with lots of details that you'll want to remember, but there's some cool stories about every one of the families. The family that she was referring to is who settled Glen Aubrey, and they came from Germany originally and Americanized the name to Kuntzlemann, very soft, but don't jump. But when I am told when they came from Germany, it was Kuntzlemann, Kuntzlemann. And I have pictures of them over here, but I'm going to start the talk with an address, and it's not real short, but it's not terribly long either. This was written for the Kuntzlemann or Kuntzlemann family reunion in 1894. How did we end up with all this stuff? How many of you are savers and collectors? Good, because that's how it perpetuates. All of these things have ties to my family and my ancestors, right up to my kids. And I guess I should tell you, maybe you don't all know, I have a new granddaughter. 2 weeks old today. 6 weeks early. Surprised us all, but she is doing very well. She's still in the NICU. And she is named for my grandmother Molly, who is pictured over there. And we'll talk about that in a few minutes. So would that be 8 generations now? So anyway, this was written by E.W. Kuntzlemann for the family reunion in 1894. A little over a century ago, Philip Kuntzlemann, the progenitor of our race, with his wife, whose name was Catherine Foster, and 6 small children, Barbara, Catherine, John, Philip, Henry, and Peter, left Tioga Township, Luzerne County, Pennsylvania, and came up the Susquehanna River to Glen Aubrey, then a part of the town of Union, Tioga County, which I did not realize, Tioga County, New York, to find a home. The country was almost all wilderness, inhabited by bear, wolf, panther, elk, deer, and wild Indian. Their progress up the river was slow and tedious. Their only means of travel was a primitive Indian canoe, to be pushed up the river with setting poles. This frail craft was laden with the family of 8 persons and with whatever household goods they were able to bring. Their subsistence consisted principally of wild game of the forest brought down with a trusty rifle in the hands of the father, and fish caught from the river, while the mother prepared the frugal meal by the campfire while watching over the 6 little ones. They were usually lulled to sleep by the howling of wolf, screeching of the panther, hooting of the owl, interlude to very monetary, perhaps, by the bark of the fox. After a slow and tedious journey paddling against the current, they arrived at Shenango Point, now called Binghamton, where there was one house far down on the point of the land between the confluence of the 2 rivers. There's 2 pages, the Susquehanna and the Shenango. After a few days of rest and recuperation, the father procured a yoke of oxen and a wheeled cart into which they stowed their earthly goods together with the members of the family who were not able to trudge on foot. You who have traveled by stagecoach, now remember this was written in 1894, so they're long before automobiles. Those who have traveled by, is where I left off, by stagecoach, rail, or perhaps by the Cunard line to Europe, which I assume is a shipping line. Think two-wheeled carts being the only conveyance to carry a family of 8 persons with the household goods from Binghamton to Glen Aubrey over a road made with an ox through the dense forest over these hills. Why, I can see the wheels of the cart, one going down in a hole and the other going over a knoll. One hub careening into a tree and the cart shy across cod, and the other hub strike on a tree and the other side, and the tongue from the yoke against the reins, and then back against the collared shoulders of the poor oxen with their tongues hanging out. I can hear the mother sing out, "Oh!" and see the children thrown from side to side and cry out in pain while being tumbled around the cart. I can hear the father crack the whip over those oxen's heads, saying, "Woe up, buck and board," to steady the cart over that rough road. I don't wonder why despair was almost unknown desire in those days. If there is anything in the wild world that would strip from Dyspersia, dyspersia, which I did not look up. Arriving in Glen Aubrey with only the canopy of leaves and the interlocking branches for covering would to us, their descendants, they had poor outlooks for a home, but that for a sturdy pair of oxen, 5 descendants and tentative race endured the hardship of the early days. They knew not what it was to quit. A rude long house was soon thrown up, into which the family will soon settle. The first time I read this, it's very difficult reading 150-year-old dialogue because it is nothing like we talk, nothing like we speak. In those days, the sheep and the cattle were allowed to get their living in the woods. The millennium not having arrived, it was not thought best to allow the wolf and the sheep to lie together. So some of the boys were dispatched early enough in the afternoon to bring them into the fold at night. The boys soon contracted the habit, boy-like, of loitering. Not that we would do that. Sometimes not getting in until dark. After the usual anxiety on the part of the mother, she conceived the idea of giving the boys a scare to teach them to be in before dark. A savage wild animal bound in those days. She went in the direction from which they were to come, and on hearing the bell, she hid behind a tree. After they had passed, she commenced imitating the wolf. After listening Philip and Henry, on being convinced that the wolves were really after them, such as shooting and shouting, in seldom seen or heard. Sometimes the boys were ahead of the sheep, and sometimes they were on top of the sheep, and sometimes the sheep were on top of the boys. Thus, it was the boys and the sheep, and the sheep and the sheep and the boys, all mixed up together. It had the desired effect. The boys could never, ever, after get in on time and our grandmother was noted as the great knitter. She would be seen on the road knitting, making neighborhood calls. On one of the occasions, a cross sheep buck took into his head that it was not quite the proper thing for an old lady to be knitting along the road. So he put his theory into practice and went for the old lady. But she was too sharp for him. Stepping to one side, he made his plunge. She took him where old Grimes took the spotted steer. And I think that means that she killed him. I'm going to skip the next couple of paragraphs. Tradition says that our ancestors were from Germany and were of the Lutheran persuasion. They were, as a race, a deeply pious people, believing strictly in the doctrine as taught by Martin Luther. It might be mentioned in this connection that the doctrine taught by Luther were those of the Mother Church from which he seceded. His protest was against the temporal rule and methods of the Pope, but not against the dogmas and doctrines of the Roman Church. Go back to the introduction of Kuntzlemann into this country. Tradition states that their first progenitor was Christopher, a cultured German gentleman who landed in Baltimore some 150 years ago, so that would have been 1740-ish, somewhere right through there. From his sprung numerous race which now inhabit Maryland, Pennsylvania, Delaware, New York, New Jersey, West Virginia, Michigan, Wisconsin, Minnesota, Indiana, Illinois, and California. So they moved around the country quite a bit, especially for not having public transportation or access to trains, etc. Although it might be said without disparagement, our bunch had never arrived as yet to any great degree of immense illiteracy attainment, political profession, or in the accumulation of wealth. But it can be truthfully said, they are kind-hearted, sympathetic, temperate, law-abiding people, kindness in preference to genius. One drop of human sympathy is better than an ounce of wealth. One grain of true patriotism to all the political trickery of the 19th century. So and I'm going to stop there for a second. Think about the time that this was written, 1894. Thank you. Teapot Dome scandal, Tammany Hall in New York, lots of scandal going on in the government at that time. Let our aim be to discharge every duty that presents itself to all our fellow men as far as circumstance will allow, and to do injury to none. Let our lives be one of good motives and good deeds. Ever let our conduct be squared by the highest principles of right and justice and of truth. These are the greatest good.
Wow.
Amazing story from 150 years ago. I'm going to move down to this end. Everything that is here on this table belonged to someone in my ancestry. He talked about the Lutheran Church. This was my great-grandmother's Bible, and my grandmother Clark, Molly, baby's namesake, so the baby is her namesake, presented this Bible to me, I believe, when I was 12 years old. And I'll jump around a little bit. That is my grandparents there. She read at her desk from her Bible every single morning. And if we as little kids, we were a 3-generation house. And if we went out while she was doing her Bible study, shh, shh, go away. And we knew that that time was hers and no one else's. She was born, well, let's keep with the Kuntzlemans for just a minute. These are two daguerreotypes that have been on the corner shelf in our living room as long as I can remember. The three here would have been Philip's and Catherine's grandchildren. This is Della Clark Cannon, Edgar Clark, and Imogene Clark, who would be my grandfather's parents, my great-grandparents. And this is Angeline Kuntzlemann Clark, who married Edgar Kuntzlemann. Okay, you want to repeat that off? Thank God I knew this part, because I don't think I could remember, but it is written down here so that I knew who it was. We are all, any of us that have been here a long time are probably related to many of us here. The book at the other end, and some of these were given to my grandparents by Mrs. Wheeler, Elsie Cannon Wheeler, who was related to the Tompkins and the Laneharts, who the mill, and next door to where Jim Tokus' house is. When I was little, that was Grace Tompkins' house, before Rick and Gloria, before Clarence and Sarah Bell, and long before Tokus's. And you're more than welcome to come up and see these afterward. Great picture of E.W. Kuntzlemann, who would have been their father and mother. And the expressions on their face are priceless. They are just really neat. I'm going to jump from the Kuntzlemanns now to the Clarks and the Streeters. Grandpa Clark was Grandpa's family was from here, actually lived in Ketchumville. And as kids, my sisters and I could do this like a poem. I have to read it though. First of all, their parents are Edgar, who's pictured there, Kuntzlemann. Edgar Jasper Clark. He was born in 1847 and died in 21. And the mother was Addie Sly Clark, who was born in 1853 and lived to 1939. Married by J.A. Farrer at the home of Rufus Clark in 1869. Now, those of you who know my grandparents, Grandpa was Rufus. This is his grandfather. So there was Rufus's back a couple of generations. I'm going to insert this little bit of that part of the family. This Rufus lived in Homer, and possibly in Cortland as well. And his brother Robert lived at the foot of the hill, and Rufus lived at the top of the hill. The bottom of the hill was by the creek. They got tired of their respective houses, so they traded. Just traded. One went up, one came down, and they are there. So anyway, Edgar and Addie had 12 children, including my grandfather. And all survived to adulthood except one. When we were kids, Sue and Sate, Jim and Bern, Abby and Addie, Rufus, Frederick, Willie, Charlotte, Alma, and Nico. And we could go back and forth. Sue and Sate, Jim and Bern. I can do the first six, and then I have to look. I can remember hearing talk that Sue and Sate, the two oldest girls, one born in 1870, one born in 1872, were having children at the same time as their mother was at the end of the 12. The only one that did not make it to adulthood was Willie, and he was born October 10th of 1888 and died as an infant at that time. One of the things that yesterday I was fortunate enough to play for a very special friend's service for his 50th anniversary of his ordination. And we were talking about dates and how old we were, how old people were. And one of the other members of the chapel I play at during the summer up in Silver Beach is turning 100 next week. And we had lunch after the service with him yesterday. And I said, do you realize that you were 29 years old when I was born? And because I just turned 70 and 30 years between us, but he would have still been 29 when I was born. Let's keep going with the Clarks and the Streeters. All right, this dress belonged to my grandmother Clark, who was Molly Streeter, and this dates to, she would have been 5 years old, 1884. She was born in 1880. And the story goes that the satin ribbons were imported from England. And her family was not from here. They were from Chinchilla, Pennsylvania. And she was married to Grandpa, and that I'll tell you about in a minute, and moved here and lived here in the town of Maine, where on Church Street, in the house that I grew up in, from 1924, they moved from Binghamton, but Edgar and Addie had owned the house from 1900 up through the time of it. There was somebody in between them and my grandparents for a short time, but it's been in our family for 125 years. And yeah, this stuff accumulates. It's never been empty. The house has never been emptied in 125 years. This is my great-grandmother Streeter. How things have changed. This was not really my grandmother's mother. It was her adopted mother. Grandma Clark's mother died when she was 4 years old. And there were 3 sisters, Lizzie, Molly, and Emily. And the father couldn't take care of them, and he gave them to 3 other families to be raised. And Grandma was taken by the Streeters, and then the other 2 sisters, 2 of them ended up here in the area, Grandma and Lizzie, her older sister. But then her father got remarried and took the girls back for a very short period of time. But the stepmother did not like the girls, and they went back to their respective adoptive homes. Something I just learned 2 years ago. After they were married, my great-grandfather and his second wife, they had a son who also had 12 or 13 children. So there are most likely some cousins that I have never met nor heard of down in the Scranton, Chinchilla area. And I'd love to trace it, I think. Does that make sense? I think I want to know, but I'm not sure. Anyway, this picture in this frame sat at the foot of the stairs at Church Street for as long as I can remember. And I'm going to bring in Ken's story of this. And I don't know if you've ever heard this, Sandy. First time Kenny ever came to my parents' house, and we're talking back and forth. He's so intrigued with all the stuff that was there. And he looked at the picture of my great-grandmother. And he said, "Oh my goodness, look at the necklace she is wearing." I said, "Hang on a minute." And I ran upstairs and brought it down because
Okay.
it was made. They wintered in Florida. Went by train from the Scranton area to Okeechobee. Yes, Okeechobee, but it's all black and crystal. Indian. It was an American Indian necklace, and he was so amazed. He said, "We don't even have pictures of our ancestors, and you've got the necklace that's in the picture." And so, even though they did not live here, I wanted to include it because of Ken, and also because she did live here. She came and lived with my grandparents at Church Street. 6 months with them, 6 months with my grandmother's adopted brother, who ended up down in Bloomsburg. And they were wholesale florists that was in business until 5-6 years ago. So that is Grandma Streeter. Sylvia asked who this was. She said, "It looks like you." And I can't deny it does. This is my grandfather, Rufus. Sue would say Jim, Bernabby, Natty, Rufus. Sixth or seventh child of Edgar and Addie. And he lived at Church Street with my grandmother, Molly Streeter Clark. And very exciting. What day is today? 17th?
Yes.
Okay. Mother's birthday will be the 19th, and their wedding anniversary is the 21st, which is also my father's birthday. This is their wedding picture, taken in 1918. All right, ladies, you ready for this? Her first marriage. Grandpa had been married before. Her name was Mary Lewis. Her parents did not approve of their marriage, which I can't imagine because my grandfather was amazing. But she died. My grandmother was a nurse who graduated in the very first graduating class at Wilson, and she took care of Mary, and when she died 2 years later, she and my grandfather got married. Now, Grandma was 38. Mom was born when she was 40. When she got married, she had an 18-inch waist. 18 inches. Corseted in. She lived to be 100. She wore a corset till very near the end of her life. I can remember Mom driving to Cortland to the corset factory to still be able to get corsets and stays to keep her pulled in. But 18 inches at 38. Amazing. My thigh is bigger than that. This is the hat that she wore in her wedding. There are 7 peacock plumes that went around it, and she and my grandfather's sisters made her entire wedding gown and hat. All right, are you surprised? Yes, I have the plumes still. But they were in a cedar chest I couldn't get to. So, and one of Mom's dolls, which we'll talk about, you asked about her collection. One of her dolls that is one of my favorites in our collection has one of the plumes on the hat, and Grandma also wore the plumes on another hat, or maybe this one, for the Easter parade in New York City in 1916. So, and the dress that's on that doll is a replica of, and my grandmother dressed that doll to match her dress from that time. My sister, and I wish I had thought to look at this, because I did get some of this back from my sisters. The necklace that she is wearing, my little sister has, which is a round piece of onyx with a seed pearl in the center and 3 gold chains hanging down very, very fine with 3 seed pearls at the bottom of each one. And Tanya wore that for her wedding. almost 50 years ago. This is my grandmother's. How many people are cold still? Anybody want to borrow it? It is a bearskin muff. Keep your hands in it while you're riding in the sleigh. What else? Grandma, I already told you she was a nurse, as was my mother. Then it skipped our generation. We'll talk about that in a minute. Grandma was a nurse, first graduating class at Wilson. This will give you goosebumps. She was, growing up, I heard her talk about Dr. Charlie, Dr. Charlie, Dr. Latimer, Dr. Charlie, Dr. Latimer. Dr. Charlie was Charlie Wilson, and they were great friends. There was only, I think, 15 girls in the graduating class, so he knew them all well. Graduated in 1914. After Mother died, all of our family are avid readers, or at least avid collectors of books that we all hope we will get to read somewhere down the road. And my grandmother loved poetry. And there was a number of books that I brought home, and there was a presentation box, very pretty plain box. Inside was a book of poetry. And I brought it home with a stack of others, put it in my bookcase. 1914, remember that. Christmas 2014, some friends of mine were at my house. And I have no idea why, but we're sitting in front of that bookcase and we're going through books. And we pulled out this box, this presentation box of poetry. And on the inside it said, to Molly Streeter, Merry Christmas from Dr. Charlie Wilson, Christmas 1914. Exactly, I have goosebumps, exactly 100 years before we looked at it that night. So, I should have brought that, shouldn't I? Sorry, next time. Grandma also was, when I was born, she was not happy. She did not want a boy. She wanted another girl. But as time went on, I became her favorite, thank God. And she helped all of us, all through so many things. Seeing as I'm talking about her and the onyx necklace, when I first started playing organ and piano professionally, I was 14 years old when I played my first church service. And I got paid $85 for playing the entire summer at Sylvan Beach Chapel. And I had wanted an onyx and diamond ring. I was 14. She was friends with the Hilkins, Hilkins Jewelers in Endicott. And we went there, and this was it was there. And I had $85. It was $125. And she loaned me the rest to buy it. And I paid her back with my paper route money over the next few months. And that's how I acquired a lot of my jewelry, because Grandpa and she inherited a collection of antique stick pins, and I wore bow ties, not weird. A straight tie has a pin to hold it in place. And when Grandma was she was 75 when I was born, and I still had her until I was 25, because she lived to be 100. But she got to a point where she thought, oh, I don't have enough money. I need to sell these. And she was going to sell the collection of stick pins. Well, I had my paper route, so I bought. There's probably 30 or so, and I went through and I went this one, this one, this one, this one, and I paid her with my paper route money and got to keep the collection. And now my sisters and I split it up, but I wear most of them. And I have a picture of the man who originally owned them, who was my grandfather's best friend, Arthur W. Lennon. If you want to go down to the cemetery, Arthur is buried here, Grandma and Grandpa are here, Mom and Dad are here, up. I always called it the penthouse, up on the top of the hill on the flat across. And he was adopted by the Indian tribe, the Redmen, and his name was changed in the tribe to Hiwayanda Key. And I can remember taking pictures of the chief and him to school for show and tell. And I have a picture of him wearing my very favorite tie pin, which has a Baroque pearl in the center, which a Baroque pearl is a pearl that's not round. It looks like it has been flattened. It looks like it's pressured down and squashed together, and it's surrounded by 13 cut diamonds. And I have a picture of him wearing it, and that's my favorite one to wear. And it's, and I, in 1972-ish, 73, so of course we went through there. I paid her $32 for it. Pretty cool. So they have stayed in the family, and that's how we end up with all this stuff. One of the things that Grandpa was 89 when he died. The day after my brother-in-law was killed during Hurricane Agnes. And Grandma lived to be 100, so another 8 years, because she was 3.5, 4 years older than him. Anyway, she was a member of the Temperance Union. She did not drink, and if you were here for the last presentation, she probably didn't approve of me bringing scotch for everyone when I did the Bowers show. But she always said, I never let alcohol touch my lips, except once, when she was working in New York, living in New York as a nurse, and a new doctor opened a clinic, and they toasted with champagne, just a sip. Until her 96th, 97th birthday. Her birthday was in August, and we were at the cottage, and my mother made her birthday cake at the cottage. And it was a rum pound cake. This is the most tasty cake I have ever had. So, but she never knew that it had rum in it. So, pretty amazing family. They're pretty cool. We'll move up to the ones that many of you knew. My mom and dad, they met during World War II in the Navy. They were both in the Navy. But I love telling this story. This is one of those, well, first of all, they would have killed any of us had we done what they did. They knew each other 6 weeks when they got married. But it didn't last, only 65 years. And then she had the audacity to die and screw up all these parties, which that's another whole story. Phil and I were talking about, or was it Gordy? You asked, which one of you asked how old she was in this picture? Phil did. This was their wedding picture, so it would have been, she would have been probably 24 or 25 when they were both in the Navy. This is the skeleton in the closet. She was a commissioned officer. He was an enlisted man. Fraternization. Both their commanding officers did know, but they were married illegally, and because she outlawed one of them, it didn't matter which one it would have been. It was an enlisted man or woman versus an officer. But as I said, they were married in May of 1945. That is her wedding picture, and this is actually the hat that she is wearing in that picture. And this is my dad's hat that if I could have found the picture of the two of them with their wedding picture, this is what he was wearing, his dress blues. Two other Navy hats. My dad was from Texas, so but I have to include him here because he was here from 45 until 2009. This was his home, even though he was always a Texan, always a Texan. It's funny, you could not hear a drawl at all unless he was tired and you were on the phone with him, and then it would sneak back in and you could hear it. And just so you know, I'm a junior, and in Texas our names are about this long because they talk. My brother-in-law and I have a standing joke that when we went home to Texas, it was nice to slow down, but when you came to a dead stop, which is how it was, because everybody that was there was older than my parents, And so it was like a stop. But our names are D. Yancey Moore, and in my case, Junior. But that's how they said it, very long and slow. But he was from Texas, but was here longer than he was in Texas. But we went back every other year, and he was still a Texan. And many of you know he rode horses professionally. We all did as kids. But he went to Oklahoma to the state fair a number of years and won the national title in Oklahoma. And one of the last times that he showed down there, he was in his 70s, and they presented him with the key to the city of Oklahoma, thinking he was from New York. And when he accepted it at the podium with the loudspeaker, he said, "Not bad for an old Texan." And they all about took the key back because there was quite a bit of controversy there. But we'll talk about him for a couple minutes. We had horses from the time that my sister, Diane, was in 9th grade. She got her first horse when she graduated from what's now J. Ralph Ingalls from the Central School. And we had horses right up until just before he died. And my wonderful stepmother, who is almost 82, is still breeding horses, world champion Appaloosas. We joke about this. We went to a horse show last year, and she said, "I think I'm getting too old to do this. I think I should sell the mares and get out of it." And we're sitting at the show, and I'm sitting in the seat behind her, and she's talking to some other horse friends. "Look at that filly. I think I need to buy her for my breeding program." We just bought another horse 8 weeks ago, another mare. So she, at 82, she is still, and I think horses keep her young as they kept my father young. And as many of you know, he was severely hurt and died as a result of it a couple of years later. He was getting on one of her horses after my mom died, and the saddle malfunctioned and threw him off backwards on the concrete, and had a traumatic brain injury. And Diane felt so guilty over it. Diane Lindenborn is my stepmama. And we all said, absolutely not. Absolutely not. He was doing what he loved to do and made his life, made him breathe. So pretty amazing. At 83, 84 years old, he was still riding and could have been showing professionally still at that time. So let's go to my mom, because she was from here. And I'm going to bounce back a little bit to my grandparents as well, because they moved here in 1924 into the house on Church Street. And there is an article that was published in the Binghamton Press about their house. And their house was built, the house on Church Street, the front portion was built in 1830, 1832, the same time as Marion Gallagher's house was built. They were the two oldest stick wood structures in the town. There was another one, the sugar house over here at Dence's was older, but it was a log cabin. But in the village, we still have one of the two oldest ones, and neither ours nor the Gallagher house are as they were back then. I'm anxious to see what happens with the Gallagher house, but it is going to be sound, which it wasn't, unfortunately. And the people who are doing it over now at least have matching windows on the front. Yes. And it looks 100% better, even if it is not historically correct. But I don't know if you ever were in there upstairs, and I'm told it's gone now. The big room that went all the way across the front was the ballroom, and it had a barreled ceiling with silver stars, which I can remember as a little kid, were either stenciled or painted into the blue sky. That was when I was little when I went the first time. Mrs. Page, Mr. and Mrs. Page lived there. Do you remember who lived on the second floor? Your next door neighbor. I can't remember. Great story about, and this is about the town, so I'll add this in even though it's not my family. In the corner of their living room, and I can remember this as a kid because I went home and I wanted to do the same thing, not completely, but Mrs. Page had an avocado plant, and it kept growing and growing and growing and growing. And they literally cut a hole in the ceiling and the floor, and it grew into the second story. I'd love to know, but the floor has now been replaced, so I'm sure that pegged piece is gone. But it went from the first floor up through into the second story.
So who lived there?
I can't remember. The Pages lived downstairs.
Pages were downstairs. Doris Berry lived there at one time, but that would have been later.
Right, and Westbury was in our house.
She was in your house, and Doris McDonald was in your house also.
Who was there?
Doris Berry was a teacher from Maine, and Doris McDonald was the music teacher in Maine.
Right.
You were my music teacher.
Yeah, mine too. Mine too.
In her upstairs, yeah.
Was she?
She
Where do you
commented on
remember?
the keys.
Yes.
Yes.
She. You remember where she was, Sylvia?
Yes, because we went trick or treating. She was in the upstairs apartment
At Rosettes.
at Rosex, and I remember her husband was a character.
I never met him. He was gone by the time I was
He
around.
was just a jolly old man, and he just delighted in us. And she was trying to shoo us back down the stairs. I remember the stairs being very narrow and very steep, and she was trying to shoo us all back down. And he kept saying, "Come on, have some more candy," and he was just very jolly.
Oh.
Yeah, yeah, I remember that.
I wish I could remember who was upstairs. Gilfillans were there.
What was that?
Alex and Roberta Gilfillan.
They were there?
They lived there, yes. I don't know if you know this or not, but when Harper College started, Dr. Bartle, who lived in where the Barnabys are, he was the first chancellor, president. He's who got Syracuse University to come to Binghamton. And Maine had more professors and employees of the college than any place else in the county.
Yeah.
Maine was the place. And Alex Gilfillan was one of the music professors. And Roberta taught at Maine schools, so some of you might have had her. Anyway, going back to the house on Church Street, 1830-ish, the front portion, it was added on countless times. My bedroom was in the old attic section, which was a step down from the front of the house, and the kitchen was downstairs. My bedroom, which was my sister's before that, was right above it. After World War II, Mom and Dad moved back here. The saying that has been passed down through the family is that my father would rather have the Yankee dollar than the Texas heat. And so he was in business in Endwell for 50 years on Watson Boulevard. The service station started off as a Texaco, became an Esso, became an Exxon when that changed, and eventually became a Chevron. And then he got his dream and had no gas and did nothing but mechanic work. So totally changed. Anyway, Mother graduated from UE when she was 17, so that would be 1937, summer of 37. And she was, what's second position? Valedictorian and salutatorian, thank you. What's really funny, Dad was how many miles away in Texas. He was valedictorian of his class, and my mom was salutatorian at UE. And if you ever go to UE, in the hallway, in the main hallway, there's a wonderful brass plaque that has all of the World War II veterans that are listed on the plaque. And it was very emotional the first time I saw it because it's all in alphabetical order and Carol Jane Clark is there. Now, a little bit of trivia from the town of Maine with that. After World War II, the American Legion was started here in town for anyone who was a veteran, but not for women. They would not let my mother join. You can join the auxiliary. And she said no. And Phyllis McIntyre Martin,
Right.
same way. Neither of them ever joined because of that. Yeah. So, but it has changed, I think, now.
Yeah, I'm sure that is.
Mom left at 17. They got married in 45. My sister was born in 46. We jokingly talk about this. Their anniversary is May 12th. Diane was born on May 14th. Sometimes we say, yeah, it was a year later. Sometimes we don't. And because it is all the town of Maine, Dad was good friends with Jerry Tull. And he would stop on the way home from Endwell to pick up something at Jerry's store. And I don't know if Jerry ever really knew the truth, but he would ask my father, hey, how's your daughter from your first marriage? And it was Diane. It was their only marriage, but he thought that she was from a separate marriage. So she's 9 years older than I am. And then my younger sister, Tanya, I was born in 55. Tanya was born in 58. And yes, I just turned 70. How does that happen? Yeah, amazing. Mom had many interests, as you all know. I remember Sue Lisk saying when she died, she said, what am I going to do? I've lost my Google. She had an amazing memory of things here in town. And my sisters, and thank God I inherited that part of my mother and my father both. My sisters will say, how do you remember that? And I always say the same thing, because I listened. We traveled together, both my mom and dad and I. I'm sure that the reason that their marriage worked so well, they both had interests that went in opposite directions. But if we wanted as kids to be with my dad, we better be with the horses. So we traveled with him, but we also traveled with Mom, who managed antique shows for PTA and for different church organizations. So I developed a love for antiques back then, and have a lot of them. And this is just a scratch of the scratch. She also had a collection of dolls, which we talked about earlier. She started the doll collection. She and my grandmother, Molly, started the collection the year I was born for my older sister, for Diane. And there were 15 dolls, 10 plus 5. When Mother died 50 years later, far too young on my dad, and I'll tell you about the parties that she screwed up, but there were 2,500 dolls between 4 houses, Linda's and mine, Diane and Bud's, Tanya and Randy's, and Mom and Dad's. Now they range in size from about that big, which is called a frozen Charlotte. That is the smallest one. And the largest one I have in my collection, which is Teddy Roosevelt on his horse made by Stife, who stands about this tall, and he sits in my music room. And when Mother died at the funeral, both Larry Rice and Ken Rozek came up to me afterwards and put their arm around me and said, you know your mother said that I could have Teddy Roosevelt. And I said, yeah, I don't think so. But that was at the funeral. So anyway, that was probably her main love, and passed it on to all 3 of us kids. What's ironic, Diane, my older sister, lives in Cortland. They just celebrated their 50th anniversary 3 weeks ago. Her mother-in-law and my mother were friends before Diane and Bud knew each other, and Scotty had one of the most magnificent doll collections in Cortland. And that has since been divided, and then some of that sold. One of the things that is an issue that that I have personally, and my sisters have, our parents never gave us permission to get rid of anything. That was never, when I'm done, whatever. Cedric and Aaron, two of my sons, are co-executors of my estate. And when Cedric first brought his then fiancée to my house, as a matter of fact, you saw them, the Bowers pictures that were hanging out my staircase, I said to Emily, as you're going through, if you see something that you would like, tell me what it is, and maybe you can have it now or you can have it later. And Cedric, very matter-of-factly, said, Dad, go through and do a pictorial inventory of the family pieces. Everything else, tell me how much it's worth, so when you die, I don't get ripped off when I sell it. And at first that bothered me. And then I thought, no, my parents never gave me permission to do that. And it's I joke about this, it's my crapé, French for crap. It's my stuff that I love. And if they don't, then I feel so fortunate with all of this stuff to be the caretaker of it for this generation. And if they don't, then I hope that they pass it on to someone that will appreciate it as much as we have. So I'm going to stop there. I'm going to go on to my family in just a second, but I forgot that this was this end. This is a autograph book, a diary that dates back to the earliest entry of 1887. Mrs. A. Kuntzlemann was the first entry, and that is her hair that is woven into a bookmark. And there are 5 or 6 of them in here, and I'll show you, here's another one. This is Della's, which is a great-grandmother. And this one, probably because I'm blonde, I love it. I have never seen one done that is blonde. But this was given to my grandparents by the Wheelers, which are also relatives. And let's see if I can, I had the paper and then I took it out. Mrs. A. Clark, which would be Rufus's, my grandfather's mother, Addie Clark. Mrs. A. Clark, our friendship has budded on early. May it blossom in heaven. And that was from Clara Shoemaker, July 13th of 1894. All of the readings in here, and some of them are very difficult to see and to read. But they're amazing, just like reading that first letter, very difficult to not understand, but to follow their wording. Some amazing artwork in it as well. I can't believe I took the paper out that I was going to read. Here it is. Okay. Some friends may wish thee free from care, others joy and wealth. Some may wish you blessings rare, long life and perfect health. My wish for thee is better far than all others have given. That's where you're from, this world. Depart, your soul may rest in heaven. Ever your friend, Jamie Snedeker, Binghamton, New York, May 12th, 1898. May 12th is my parents' anniversary. I had never thought that before. But this, if you do open it and look at it, you're more than welcome to. Just be very careful. We all handle it. I am a firm believer that all of these old things are not meant to be on shelves. They are meant to be used and enjoyed. And I've told this, many of you, I've said this to personally. When Linda and I divorced, I took the Corel out of the cupboard, put china in, took the stainless steel out of the silver drawer and put the sterling silver in, and used it every day. It's not worth anything sitting in a cupboard. Enjoy it. Obviously, I don't carry this, but if any of you would like to, it'll keep your hands warm. The derby and the voter hat were my grandfather's. Whose do you think this one is?
That's your father's. Yeah.
That's one of them. Up to my generation, we've talked about my sister Diane and Bud, and Tanya and Randy, and Linda and I. Linda and I were together for 30 some odd years, and we are still very good friends, even though we are not married any longer. Diane and Bud have 2 daughters and 3 grandchildren. 3 grandchildren, I'm right. My younger sister has a boy and a girl and a boy, all the way around, and 2 and 3 grandchildren. Linda and I have 5 kiddos. And I'm very proud of this. And some people might not agree, but I had 5 sons. I now have 1 daughter and 4 sons. My daughter is the happiest she has ever been in her life, and people said some pretty bizarre things to Linda and I, and it was Linda that said this. How can you support what Devin is doing? And she said, I'd rather pay for this than pay for a funeral. And it's so true. Devin, if you have not seen her in the last 3 years or so, she is beautiful, she is amazing, and she's full of life, where before she was just not. So anyway, Linda and I have 5 kids, and we had 1 grandson, Hugo, who's Cedric and Emily's, 4 years old. I'm very proud to say he played his first piano recital this summer at 3+. Wasn't Rachmaninoff, wasn't Beethoven, he didn't run away from the piano, so I was happy. And I got to be there for it, and I was able to get a piano for him, which his mother finally agreed would be okay to have in the house. So it cost me far more to deliver it to Baltimore than to buy the piano, but he is amazing. And some of you heard when we first started, we have a new granddaughter who was born 2 weeks ago today, 6 weeks early. And she is named for my grandmother and one of Megan's relatives, Molly Jean. She's doing well. And by the end of January, we will pass my 2 sisters. We will have 4 grandchildren. 2 of the other boys, their wives are due, 1 in December and 1 in January. So this is a picture from Aaron and Megan's wedding with all of the kids. And yes, Megan is, if she stands on her tiptoes, is 5 foot tall. Aaron is 6'4". He's taller than I am, maybe 6'5". But they're who just had a baby. And then Tyler and Cedric and their family, their wives, are having the other 2. Got one last thing I want to read, and then we are done. If I can see, maybe in a second. I said before that there are a number of families that we're connected to that are maybe not related. Well, we are related, but back a couple of generations. My family on the Clark side are tied to the Ameses, both Lee and Dorothy. Clarence, well, because Clarence was Lee's half-brother, I believe. The Tompkins that were in the Comstock, West Comstock house, and where Tokuses are, or were. Um, the Laneharts from the mill. The Wades were tied to the Laneharts. So there is a weaving of all these different ones. And in 1988, Grandma Ames, Dorothy, who many of you knew, who was poet laureate for our town, wrote this poem and dedicated it to me, which we were doing a dedication at church for music, and she wrote this. On this day of dedication, memory recalls the strains of music through the years beneath these hallowed walls. And many dear ones gone before are also brought to mind, for their dedication still inspires those left here behind. Their spirits are among us, though they've joined the saints above, for neither death nor distance can erase the bonds of love. Bless, dear Lord, the ones who bring us in the present days music to enhance our worship for thy merit's highest praise. We thank you for the blessing of this hour and of this day. May your spirits be among us. May your spirit be among us, as in reverence we pray. Grant the harmony of music may continue to descend upon our congregation. In Jesus' name, amen. Dorothy Lawton Ames. I hope you have enjoyed this. I had such a fun time putting this together. And I think I remembered most of it. I wanted to make sure I talked about the temperance because that was very big for Grandma. She did not approve. And even when she had it, she didn't know. Last in closing, because I know a lot of us have talked about this and mourned my mother's passing abruptly, and we have joked about this, that we're still mad at her. As a matter of fact, I'll say what I usually say, we're still pissed at her for dying, because there are ends of seasons, and it didn't feel like it was the end of her season. I remember driving to the lake with her 2-3 weeks before she died. And also, if you want to visit the Kuntzlemann's graves, they're in the cemetery in Glen Aubrey. That is the last time I was in that cemetery. And not for any morbid reason, I just haven't gone back. But she died just a few weeks later. But I remember talking to her on the way to the cottage. And she was actually driving. And I wanted to go someplace, the two of us. And she said, Yancey, I'm tired. I'm almost 85. I said, Mom, you've got another good 15 years, because that's how many my grandmother had. And I remember her saying, I don't want that. I'm okay. I don't want that. But then when she died, she messed up all these parties. It was, let me see what I can do. It was Diane and Bud's 30th anniversary, because Mother's been gone 20 years this year. I know. Their anniversary, Cedric's 16th birthday, her 85th, my 50th, and most importantly, my good grand piano's 100th birthday, which she loved to come to my house and play. And I said to some parents the other day, if I have a regret, which I don't have very many, but if I have a regret, I wish I had given her that piano at her house so she could play it whenever she wanted. But she came to my house regularly to play it. And so we didn't, any of us, feel like celebrating parties that year. But it's, there are seasons. There are seasons of life. And thank God we're not in control, because we mess it up. But you never know. You don't know. So my stepmama and I talk about this all the time, which goes along with the whole family thing. Live every day to the fullest. Live it as if it's your last. Ride that bull. What's the song? I think it's a country song about the guy who was the baseball player that his father. Anyway, take the chance. Go out and live life every day to the fullest. And that's what I've tried to do and continue to do. So thank you so much. You can come up and take a look closer at these things if you would like.